You have worked a lot on digitalization as a whole, and you're really passionate about that. शुरू कहाँ से हुआ? What was the sort of एक होता है ना the pinnacle moment?
I think the trigger for me was always looking at how to continuously improve.
When you say digital nation, what does that mean?
The world is shifting to becoming digital.
What we are doing right now with your lens, are we going on a right direction?
We are trying to do exports purely on physical economy mindset, and we are not producing unicorns that are going to operate in the digital economy. Where are we going to be as a nation in 20 years from now?
But again, my question would be like, what's stopping us?
I don't think we have really built a truly robust ecosystem that supports the growth of these digital businesses.
You have talked about talent. That's again one of the things which I feel like is the most important thing.
Are we producing talent that is really disruptive in their thinking? Talent we are producing or trying to produce is not for today.
What is AI?
I like to talk about AI as the biggest disruption of century.
Let's say fake news, disinformation, digital safety, digital security. How can AI, how is AI or this thing is affecting that thing?
Social media for me is a double-edged sword.
In context to the fake news and disinformation, the role of big tech.
They have to become, I think, more responsible in ensuring that they are not becoming a part of the problem.
Mohammad, thank you so much for taking the time out. हमने आधी गपशप तो मेरे ख्याल से we have already done in the meeting room.
I think we should have recorded that. It would have been better.
But the world is getting scary, I think, and what we were talking about inside. But before we go into that, मुझे very quickly थोड़ा सा background, who you are, where are you from, or what did you study, और फिर like we just come into the असल जो चीज़ है जिसके लिए हम बैठे हैं आज.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thank you for having me here. It's really a pleasure, and I think the topic as well is really interesting. I like to call myself in a fun way a product of international collaboration. So my mother is English and my father is from Pakistan, and hence having foot in both camps. Had my early schooling over here in Pakistan, and then I started my career actually in the UK as a public servant.
So you moved out when you were young?
I was, basically did my undergrad, and then I decided to shift to the UK and started basically my career over there. And then I shifted into the private sector, and basically consulting became my core. And since then, been working with different governments around the world, advising and helping in how to really get governments to be citizen-centric. That's my kind of core. And of course, technology and other elements become just natural things to play with to drive that citizen centricity.
So you have worked a lot on digitalization as a whole, and you're really passionate about that. शुरू कहाँ से हुआ? What was the sort of एक होता है ना the pinnacle moment when you were working in the government? You said कि you wanted like efficiency and all of it, but what like did you remember like the moment?
I think the trigger for me was always looking at how to continuously improve. And I remember a program in the UK government which was around encouraging people to come up with innovative ideas to really disrupt the way we're doing things. We called it continuous improvement at the time. And the second theme was around, in those days, it wasn't called customer experience, it was called customer satisfaction. So how do we make sure the public who we are serving and we're doing business with are satisfied with government services? But internally also, what could we do to innovate and to really drive improvements? So that kind of triggered my interest in innovation.
What is digitalization? Like, how do you define, like, for a simple person, कि ये हम word तो बहुत ज़्यादा सुनते हैं, and we were in the room, पीछे हम discuss कर रहे थे कि जी IT exports maybe is equal to digitalization, या आप बस digital कर दें हर चीज़ को. So how, like, आपने काफ़ी काम किया है. So
Yeah.
very, like, you know, ज़रा सादे लफ्ज़ों में आप कैसे explain करेंगे?
So first of all, I think I need to caveat that by saying it's about a perspective. Everyone has a different way of maybe addressing and answering the same question and have different definitions. But I'm going to give you my perspective, what I believe digital is and what I believe it's not. Firstly, we, in my opinion, and why we don't see a lot of the step change and really radical breakthrough is because we are confusing, in my opinion, digital and IT. So if we want to define it in a purest form, we can define IT as something that answers a technical question. How can IT help my business run? Digital for me is answering a different question. It's a business question, not an IT question. It's about how can my company, my organization, me as a human being, me as a government or a country operate in the digital age we are living in today. So it is a profoundly different way of answering a question of digital. When you answer it from the lens of IT, you end up with an IT strategy. And for me, being a purist in this area is that if it's the same thing, why are we calling it digital? IT strategies existed, IT existed, let's continue to just call it that. So for me, digital has to be something different by definition, because IT existed, IT strategies existed. So I found, you're familiar with probably Gartner. Gartner defines it in this, close to this way. So I liked their definition, and I adopted that definition. So when I look at it is from that perspective. Now in there are many layers of it. Some we can talk about, like at the top end, it's really becoming digital. That's why I say becoming digital nations in the book. And I talk about reimagining our countries for the digital era, which is different to saying, how can I use IT to operate my country? When you're looking at it from a much bigger perspective, you will really look at disrupting. So you will get to start creating concepts in a way that are really disruptive and profound. So that's basically the way I look at the concept of that. Now, of course, you can say, I'm going to digitalize something that exists, which is also fine, but that is closer to the IT mindset. I am going to become digital is something where I'm saying, you know what, I am going to become something that is going to be accessed and consumed in the digital space that we operate in. So YouTube is a digital platform. I'm going to create content that is actually going to be provided in that digital platform, is basically then true, you can say, adopting to the digital world. And we can talk about some of the examples when we come to the economy side of things as well.
When you say digital nation, what does that mean? Because again, in one way, आम बंदा या सरकार तो इसको ऐसे सोचेगी कि जी हम लोग digitalize कर दें. But what really is digital nation? Can you give me one example as a product?
Right. So the thinking process behind this is, and we were talking about this earlier as well, that the world is shifting to becoming digital. And let's simplify that, what we mean by that. It means online.
Yeah.
So everything is starting to shift towards online. We spoke about industry level even shifts. So advertising, for example, the global advertising spend in 2020, I believe, for the first time, became more than 50% in the online space versus in the physical space. So it's important to understand these two different spaces. And that's why when we look at digital, we need to think of it that one is about operating in the physical world with technology to enable that to happen, but one is about operating in the digital world or the online world. So when we look at it from that perspective, you can see then the difference between the two. Now, when I take, for example, let's take a restaurant as an example, as a business. Physically, they have to produce the food. We still need to eat it. But I can look at the access point to be completely digital. I can access that food item through an app or a platform, order it, etc. So a lot of people call them these cloud kitchens kind of model. But I will receive them physically and I'll consume them physically, right? So that I would class as a hybrid digital native business. So it's something that we can access digitally but consume physically. Uber is a similar example where we access it digitally but consume it physically. Netflix or YouTube are businesses which are completely digital native. We access them digitally and consume them digitally.
Again, if we think about a Pakistani perspective, digitalization, the focus, I think, right now in terms of the economy, like IT exports, IT exports, IT exports. And obviously we give example अपने neighbors से ज़ाहिर इंडिया ने 90s में शुरू किया, we are still behind, we need to do this. जो थोड़े बहुत फ़ायदे भी मिल रहे हैं, let's say taxes wise ये वो सारा, तो वो IT companies and build engineers and this and that and like send people outside and so they can bring. So but what you are saying, if we think what we are doing right now with your lens, are we going on a right direction?
I believe that there is different ways of addressing the same problem. And the way I would address it is looking at going on a mission, what I call of building unicorns. For those of people, audience who maybe don't have an understanding of a unicorn, it's a digital business that has a market cap of 1 billion or more. Why I think that is the right direction to go in is because that's where the game changing is happening and potentially can change the game. Take YouTube as one example. Its market cap is around $455-ish billion, more than the whole GDP of the country of Pakistan. Its revenue is around $50 billion a year. You can see the percentage, probably around about 12, 13, 14% of Pakistan's GDP. We are at around 3 billion in terms of IT exports. That constitutes something less than 1% of the GDP of a country. If we take the example, or we accept that the digital world is the new battleground, and when I say digital world, I'm talking about where these online businesses are operating and thriving, right? So the YouTubes and Netflixes of the world, et cetera, et cetera. If that's the world, that is the new economy, which actually is borderless. That's the interesting part of the digital economy, is borderless. And if we do not adopt into that to take a value from that for our own nation, others are going to take value out of our country and benefit from. So I'm not close enough to know what's the policy around digital platforms, but let's take Netflix as an example. Let's assume, for 1 second, I may be wrong on this, so please forgive me if I am, that there is no regulations in the country to ensure that all the revenue that Netflix has generated from Pakistan is being contributed back into Pakistan in some shape or form. A classic business which is operating in Pakistan would pay taxes, right? Now imagine they're not paying any taxes. You and I all are subscribing to Netflix and whatever we are paying, and that revenue is going out of the country. So keep this scenario in mind. And more businesses are starting to operate in there. And World Bank studies have suggested that the digital economy is growing at 2.5 times faster than the conventional economy. So that means at some point in time, the total world economy, right now, the digital economy is around about between 15 and 18%. Different actors talk about it in different ways. Analysts talk about it in different way. Gartner, I think, puts it at 15%. Foster puts it probably about 17, 18%. So let's suppose it is that. And now apply the 2.5 times faster, which, by the way, since the AI and generative AI coming into the picture, is probably gone even much
Probably,
more
yeah,
faster,
yeah.
right? So
More than
because
double,
the figure I'm
probably.
giving you is I think it's a 2020 or 2022 study. So if they did the study now, there's no reason why maybe it'll come up with is 10x, for example. So let's take that scenario that is 10x. When will the digital economy become bigger than the physical economy? Which year? Not difficult to work out. So if that's the economy that is growing faster than the physical economy, and we are trying to do exports purely on physical economy mindset, and we are not producing unicorns that are going to operate in the digital economy, where are we going to be as a nation in 20 years from now?
But again, my question would be like, what's stopping us? Because for the last 6, 7, 10 years, startup ecosystem started becoming really, sort of trendy, and like, there are a lot of investments. Companies started feeling, ठीक है, governance and economy and security, वो वाले तो मसले हैं. You have worked with the government, you have worked a lot with the startups, you know the ecosystem. What really is an issue with the Pakistani startup ecosystem?
I would say there are a few things that I would put my finger and say we need to think differently about this. One is I don't think we have really built a truly robust ecosystem that supports the growth of these digital businesses. If we study what's happened in Silicon Valley, we study what's happened in Estonia, we study some of the other countries where they've been, really successful, we'll probably find some different characteristics that we can then enable. One of them probably is going to be on the talent side. Are we producing talent that is really disruptive in their thinking? Or are we producing talent that is very conventional in their thinking and therefore applying those things in a conventional way? Do we need to go on a mission to actually disrupt our talent of the future? So do we need to work on producing potentially better digital innovators and digital entrepreneurs? That's one of my questions. Then comes the ecosystem elements of the others, like finance, access to finance, obviously access to ideas, support, etc., etc. Are we running our incubators, for example, or accelerators in a conventional way versus in a really disruptive way? Are we trying to apply some of the disruptive mindsets and thinking that those countries have applied or not? So investment in something is very different to taking a VC mindset, right? So I don't know for sure, but I'm just putting a question. Are our VCs that are here thinking more as investment mindset, or are they truly VCs who are willing to take 1,000 bets and fail on them and maybe have one success? Because that's a different mindset to saying, I want to look at opportunity and the business case for everyone, and I'm only going to invest in it if it's a real shot that I'm going to make it happen. So I don't have the answer to that. I'm just putting some questions to think about these things. So the ecosystem, I think, is really important. The mindset is really important. The talent side is really important. And then the government regulations. How easy is it to start a business?
It's
Is a
not an
question,
easy at all.
right?
Yeah.
And can you do it easily? What are the repercussions that come on you when you start a business? Do the burdens come on you in such a way that you back off? And because you cannot continue because there's so many regulations, so many different things. So this is the thing we need to be thinking about. And I would say when we go on the reimagining route, we say, okay, let's reimagine how the ecosystem could look like for a digital economy. And let's define it and say, okay, frictionless, simple, easy, that will enable the youth to be able to produce and start companies without fear of failure.
You have talked about talent. That's again one of the things which I feel like is the most important thing, even to think, to do, like for everything really. And that is obviously connected with the universities, the education ecosystem. And that is also like really not good what we are trying to produce. And again, I think the biggest question going on a macro level and think, what do we need in like 5 to 10 years?
Yeah.
So how do you see that, and what are your sort of suggestions or what needed to be done there?
So firstly, I think you have put your finger on probably the most important element that a government has to solve for, which is always ensuring that the talent that comes out of our system of education is relevant for that age or that era. Today, the talent we are producing or trying to produce is not for today. The problem generally, I'm not talking just about Pakistan, if you look at the education systems, generally they are structured on producing talent for that period of time when they put the system in place. Yes, they evolve, but they evolve at a very slow pace.
In Pakistan, we are not even producing that as well. We are probably producing the last sort of the last quarter.
So, and it's a batch system, right? So it's like a batch system. You have nursery, class 1, 2, 3, 3. And imagine now, and why I'm saying this is the most important area to tackle for is because what we are going to produce as talent, as human capital, that will come out 10 years from now, if it's not produced with the mindset of what's going to happen then, how the world is looking like then, how the economy is there then, we will always be in an irrelevant position. They will always be struggling to find jobs because the world has shifted. And we have produced talent to solve the problems of today, not to solve the problems of tomorrow. So the education system has to be much more real-time evolving than any of the other things in the country. And that should be the primary focus of the government of any country is how do I ensure I am producing relevant talent for years to come.
You have used the word disruption a lot, and that's your title as well. And if we connect this with the role of AI, because for the mass audience, I think they probably can relate with AI a lot more, especially the young people. And it's, again, a buzzword as well as a reality. Every now and then, or maybe especially the ChatGPT, every day there is Sam's video and you're like, wow, like, what's happening and what's coming. In a very simple way, if you can explain what is AI and what's happening right now in the AI world, and how people and governments are they using it right now, and how?
Yeah. So I like to talk about AI as, and especially generative AI, as the biggest disruption of our century or easily our generation or the decade we're living in, whichever term you want to use. But it is the biggest disruption that I have seen. And often people will talk about AI from the point of view is that, okay, we've had these different revolutions of industry 1, 2, 3, in industry revolution 4.0. For me, it's slightly different. Slightly different because I don't think that in any of those we were working on replacing the human brain. What generative AI is doing in a very simple way, and some get scared with this, and myself as well, is it is looking to replace the human brain. And I'll give you an example. And disrupting, by the way, full industries. So one of the examples I gave, I think earlier we were talking about a AI-based platform that you go to create a logo. You have your business name, you put it in there, and you answer a few questions. What industry you are in, what kind of style you like, etc., etc. And you press go, and it creates hundreds and hundreds of different kinds of logos. And you keep on scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, which is crazy. Because typically how we would have created a logo, if you think about it, gone to a advertising agency.
Someone just give you 3-4 samples,
Think of the friction as well. Yeah. I have to explain, they will do it, they will...
The weeks of
back
work.
And forth, maybe weeks of work. So within seconds, you are now getting a long list of possible. Are they as creative as you want it to be or not to be? I'm just talking, this is a start. This will evolve. Then it gives you an option. Do you want to buy the logo or do you want to buy some of our additional services? So I said, just curious, and I wanted to explore. And I said, you know what? I'll take your top end product offering, which was $120.
And that's a month or
That was 1 year. For 1 year,
Okay.
$120, basically. And what did it give me? It gave me a complete branding kit. A complete branding kit, including the business card design in multiple ways. I can choose whichever one I want to. It gave me the letterhead design, multiple options. It gave me the your stationery, all the items in multiple options. It gave me then the merchandise material like t-shirts, hats, cups, everything, pens, already produced for you as concepts that you can just take to someone and say, print me a mug like this or a t-shirt like this. It gave me social media, the banners and stuff that you can use on different social media, pre-made in multiple options. It gave the marketing like brochures and stuff like that, not just that they were templates, but with content based on the industry you had picked. And to top it, they gave me 3 websites, pre-populated, with images, with content based on the industry I picked, that I can just, through their platform, actually launch. And that all in a few minutes. That's a whole industry potentially disrupted. Now, will it disrupt or will it become a hybrid? So creative people will use it as a tool to create and still charge me the money they charge, but do it in a very short period of time. And start now applying anything you want to. You tell me a concept and I'll tell you whether that is already happening or not. There's a platform where you can produce songs. You can write, and in not just one language, many languages. And it can be with images, with a video. Podcasts. There is a platform where all I have to do is take a news item URL and cut paste it into that and ask it to produce me a podcast. And it will produce a conversational podcast between 2 people about that news article or whatever it was. It could be a book. Having a conversation like we are having a conversation today about that topic. So this is what generative AI is doing. It is disrupting many industries because what at the core it is, as human beings, how did we get to the point of today, you and I, to be able to have this conversation? We went through a journey. We had early schooling. Someone was feeding information into our brain. So that's what I would say is the data that is going to be used to produce the AI models. So we were being pumped in data all the time during this journey to get to this point where we can reference this data. We recall from our brain, we had an incident of this, we had an incident of that, we learned from this, we learned from that, that was a book I read, and we recall it. And that's what AI is doing. And then we train it. For example, when we learn how to ride a bike, the training part or a car is the easy part. Being able to then do it in all situations is another. We learn when we get on the road, we discover that, there was rain and we slipped because we didn't realize that you have to ride it in a different way. If it's an oily road, it has a different reflection of riding a bike, if it's in the snow, etc. And we train ourselves through these situations because as we get impacted by these situations. And eventually we get to a point where we are proficient at riding a bike in every possible scenario. Now, when you start thinking from this perspective that this is what AI is doing, and there are studies which have shown on healthcare, for example, the AI, the virtual doctor is performing better in diagnosing than the actual doctor itself, which is in the physical world. So is this disruption happening and continue to happen? Yes. And I think this is where we need to be thinking very carefully about what does it mean for nations.
Talk to me a little bit about AI agents, because I'm exploring that world a little bit. And that's also I'll not say scary. I think that's very useful. I don't need to hire maybe 10 assistants. Like one is managing my calendar, one is managing my travel. So what is an AI agent?
So in simple terms, it's basically someone who is going to do the jobs for you, right? So, instead of you having to do it, they will do it for you. So think of them as an assistant. I mean, Right now I'm experimenting with a concept. So I explained to you I have a startup I'm working on, which is focused on emotional well-being, called Simply Human.
Simply human.
Simply Human, and we are trying to basically. It's a mission-driven initiative, you can say, and its core purpose is that how do we enable the youth of today to become more resilient and stronger adults, emotionally strong as they grow up in their life, because a lot of the challenges that we face in later times in our life are rooted back to the early stages of our growing up, when we get affected by certain things. So it's basically focused on that. So I'm sharing this example because to show you my thought process right now. So at the moment, how am I doing that? I have a design agency that is working on that. I have someone who's producing content for that. I have someone who is doing the engineering of the code, etc., for that. And then obviously we're going to market the product to try and reach and get customers that will, adopt this product and start using it. So at the moment, I'm kind of thinking of how can I use agents to do each one of these jobs, or platforms to do each one of these jobs. And I've come to the conclusion that potentially I can create and operate this platform or the app without humans. Because there are platforms that exist where you can actually go and do design without human intervention. Your screens can be designed. There are platforms that exist where you can do the coding. So imagine all of the coders of today who are in a job because of just the coding skills, and a platform will be able to do the coding. The same is for outreaching towards the customers, potentially to attract them to come. So it is possible. Whether it will work or not, it's a proof of concept. So I
Maybe not right now, in 5 years' time. Like then it's like
exactly.
Yeah.
But there are certain things like podcast, for example. I am very much going to experiment with that platform to produce a podcast every day.
And you can make your own avatar as well.
And I can make my meta-human avatar, which is me, representing me, speaking like me, because the voice tone and everything will be, my mannerism and everything will be close to that. So it's a travel of direction, and it will get more and more sophisticated as we go along. These are the kind of things we need to be thinking about as a nation. Any country, what does this mean for my economic activity in my country, the people of my country? How is it going to disrupt potentially my nation? And what can I do about it? If I bury my head in the sand and it's just, okay, maybe that's a strategy you can look at using and see, okay, what happens? Or you can say, I'm going to tip my toe in the water and I'm going to experiment a bit. Or you can say, you know what, I'm going to dive in. So what you're seeing in AI, the announcements from the US, from Saudi Arabia and other countries are dive-ins. They're all 100 billion or whatever, 500 billion, whatever the numbers are. Everyone is talking about this is what we're going to do. So what is going to happen when all of this money starts to flow into these product areas? New startups will emerge, disruption will happen, and more these platforms will mature and become successful.
Do you think the future is like in terms of building a startup? Right now, there are like teams and big businesses, SMEs. Maybe the future, not maybe, I think I'm sure, like the millionaire or billionaire solopreneurs, as you said, like you are only one man band
100%.
and you're running a whole company with AI agents.
100%. Look, there's already so much talk about a potential one-person unicorn. There's
1% unicorn
already talk, and there are, if I'm not incorrect in the numbers, Midjourney, which is one of the platforms that produces imagery, basically creative, is a 16-person company, and I believe, if I'm not correct, it's a unicorn.
16 people company.
Yeah.
Wow.
So just think of what's happening now. Imagine that's the world where it's going. Could we be looking to produce one-person unicorns because we are creating the environment to enable that to happen? So what are the things that need to be in place that will enable that to happen is what we should be looking to solve for. And even if we continue on the policy or we want to do IT exports, let's raise it to 25 billion. And that is ambitious for us. It seems like it, which for me is like seriously not ambitious target at all. But let's experiment as well. Let's give it a chance. Let's say, look, let's create a unit or something that all it's going to do is potentially try to produce unicorns from Pakistan. And let's work on both tracks and see what happens. Yes, if we get to 25 billion, great. We will all be proud of that. But what if we are able to produce 2, 3, 10 unicorns? Our turnover of the country or our GDP of the country will be in billions of trillions of dollars, not a growth of billions. Can it happen? I don't know. Should we try? Absolutely.
I was reading somewhere the future of entertainment industry, and someone was telling that I think in Disney they are experimenting this internally, and they have made few products which are not in the public, that there will be a time, probably in a year's time or 2 years' time, that if you're watching a movie, there is no end.
Yeah.
There is no story. So they will be looking at your expression
and creating
that's just insane.
Yeah.
Okay, you're not interested. Okay, let's put this hook.
Look, sentiment analysis and these kinds of things is starting to become more and more prevalent. And a lot of people say, AI doesn't have emotions, or they can't figure out these kind of stuff, blah, blah, blah. Of course, we as human beings are immensely more powerful than any AI. The way we are created, it's an amazing. Just studying AI and what it can do, generative AI, it really brings me to the point of saying, what Allah has created, honestly, is just amazing as a machine, and the capability of that. But this is an evolution that is incredibly interesting, where the world is heading, and what should we be doing about it? Should we just say, I'm scared from it, so I'm not going to even dabble with it? Or I'm going to say, what? I need to understand it better and see how I can use it. How can I apply it? What can I do with it? And truly transform life to a point where it is for better for everyone in the nation. Could we reimagine our educational system? Could we reimagine our healthcare system to a point where we can really give the best possible quality of access to best quality advice from anyone? So any system that is logic-based is up for disruption, for sure. And on the sentiment side of things, what I was going to share with you now, that the note takers we have, that we can have and invite as agents as part of our meetings on Zoom or what have you, and it takes all the notes, summarizes it, and it doesn't just summarize and give you. It tells you about the sentiments. How much attention was there in the call? Did it feel like they were not interested in the topic, or they were interested in the topic? These kind of things which we were not being able to get in an effective way if you have a room of 30 people. Because I need to then see everyone and try and get a sense of were they really attentive or not. But now, with these tools, you can get a pulse check of the whole conversation of 20 people, and it'll give you how much they were really focused on the topic, or were they not really interested in the topic.
You've also mentioned earlier that we have talked about like advantages and benefits and the need and everything. If we go into, I'll not say disadvantages, but let's say fake news, disinformation, digital safety, digital security. How can AI, how is AI or this thing is affecting that thing? And again, like we are from a news background, there's a lot of like fake news now. And now a lot of times as a proper journalist, like we are unable to even fathom what's really happening.
So look, this is an area, social media for me is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's a great equalizer and democratizing information and voice. But on the other hand, it creates problems that can lead to riots and stuff, which we've seen. So I believe this is the right time when thinking has to happen around how this space is managed well in a way that we don't curtail the voice and the opinion and everything. At the same time, we give trust, because the bottom line is trust. I don't know what we can do with the social media really to get to a point of absolute trust or absolute 100% accuracy, but there are tools and there are experiments taking place where this can be flagged, and picked up that as being a fake news or generated by non-human. But that's also becoming very, very sophisticated.
Yeah.
So even there are AI tools which will, if you created, let's say, content from an AI tool, and which is having some plagiarism in it, there are tools which can actually then make it possible that those things are taken out of the system. So it's basically seen as original content.
In terms of, again, if you talk about like news and let's say the digital landscape, digital literacy, misinformation, disinformation, what is the role of big tech? And because right now, obviously, you meet with a lot of people. I recently met the YouTubes and the Metas, and they have the sections, they have the departments of countering fake news and all of it.
Right.
But in one way, a lot of people say that that's in their benefit, that if people are having a digital, discussions and wars and like it's the likes and the views and everything. So in terms of, in context to the fake news and disinformation, the role of big tech.
Yeah, look, it is one where they have to become, I think, more responsible in ensuring that they are not becoming a part of the problem. And what exactly that role should be and how it should evolve, I don't have a perspective, a complete picture of that, but I do believe that we are in a stage where we need to answer these questions, and we need these big players to actually play a role in truly transforming the way they operate. And it's not just about, okay, take my hands off and I just created the platform and therefore whatever happens there is not my responsibility because legally people are signing up to provide their opinion. I think there is a sense of change needed in ownership of problems, not just from a taking your hands away from it and saying, it's nothing to do with me. I think it's a very complex challenge to solve, and I don't think it's an easy one to solve for, because we now have billions of people in this kind of digital world which are using these platforms for even the day-to-day earnings. So I think I don't have the answer really. I haven't quite got to that. I know that there is a different social contract that needs to be in place. What that is, I don't know precisely, but I do know that it's not something we can just leave as it is today.
And if you talk about future, हमने फायदे तो देखे AI के and like all of it. What do I have to be worried about? Again, in terms of the AI, in terms of what's coming.
Again, as every technology or every revolution that we've seen in the industry, it comes with its pros and cons. It comes with obviously some negative side of things, and negative side of things will always exist, but we need to try and manage those in a way that protect the general public. And I think that's one of the jobs that government has to really step up in every country around the world to really perform. How do I protect my citizens from the bad actors that will use these technologies for the sake of other reasons? So obviously, fake news is one of them, which we know how much content can be created, and people are going to grow up on those things. The generation of beta generation is going to grow up on this. So if they're not going to be able to somehow regulate or protect the citizens from the information that is flown to them through these sources, then for them, the reality of the world is going to be what they have been exposed to through these podcasts, which were created by a platform, not by human beings like we're doing now. So these are kind of the one of the side of things. And the second is obviously what's going to happen to the population. That for countries especially which have large populations, what's going to be the role of those people in the future when many of these things that are happening today become autonomous? So that's another side effect we need to be planning for. Our people have the right lifestyle and the good life, at the end of the day, we still need to live. So those are a couple of things that come to top of mind, which I think we need to definitely look at.
So when we are talking about like fake news and disinformation in Pakistani context, we see there are a lot of laws by governments. Like jo government aati hai, they start like a new sort of mechanism, and the broader sort of perspective for them is to contain obviously disinformation, misinformation, digital harassment, and things like that. But when again, like in the start when you said like digital nations and digital governments, so how should a government think when they are making these laws? And maybe if you can give any reference of any other country.
Look, typically, let me get to the core of the problem statement around this. The challenge is that countries need to operate, or governments need to operate countries, right? And because that's their primary job. Their job is to run a country. To run a country, of course, they are looking at a very broad spectrum of things, not from one particular micro lens. So they're thinking of, how do I run this country in an efficient, effective manner that one is costing less, it's being more effective, and it's protecting the rights of everyone, the citizens, right? So protection of citizen rights is a core, in my opinion, job of the government. Whether those rights are protected by policing, the physical policing, or the policing of other industries, or even the social media side of things, there is a job to be done. How do we do that in a way that doesn't disrupt or kill innovation is really the problem statement. Because you want to obviously evolve. And if you over-regulate, and we've seen these in countries around the world where over-regulation has actually killed an industry or killed the economy. Or we've seen when the regulations are being too open, under regulation, that it actually has had an effect on the rights of people. So it's a very difficult tightrope that a government has to walk, but doing it in such a way that enables for both the innovation to continue and not get stifled, but at the same time, the protection is there in place. Often what countries do when it comes to emerging technologies is they create what we call sandboxes. So rather than regulating very heavily, let's say blockchain as a technology or AI as a technology, and we are scared of that technology and we don't know how to regulate, because if you have not experienced it, you don't understand the scope of it, how can you regulate it or put a policy in place? So often governments, what they do is they will say, let's create this protective environment, which they call a regulatory sandbox or a policy sandbox. And they'll say, okay, come, experiment in this sandbox without fear of what could happen. And from that, then the evolution of the regulations or the policies come, because the government also learns through that process as well. And we've seen this a lot, for example, in the fintech industry. Many like state bank kind of organizations that are regulating the financial sector have established regulatory sandboxes for the fintech industry so that they can experiment and without getting overburdened with regulations. The same thing is happening in other industries, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education and stuff. So it's something that we need to find a happy balance around. So not to over-regulate, to kill the innovation, but not to also under-regulate, that actually creates then the other negative side of it, which is the rights of people starts to get violated.
Lastly, in a very easy way, if an ordinary person is listening to this and if they want to start learning about AI, about what's coming next, how do I be a part of it? What are the let's say the 5 steps you will tell an 18-year-old?
Definitely, I would encourage them to have a curious mind to start with and really go explore and see what these things can do. What does it mean? And try to explore platforms that will do these kind of things I'm talking about, so they can really get a sense of how their world is changing and how their life will shape differently in the future. Definitely, our education system has a big role to play, and to try and bring up to speed students and get them aware of what these emerging technologies mean, not just AI, but many of the others, and it's the fusion of these technologies which is really going to make the profound change. Robotics has been there for a number of years, right? But how robotics and generative AI is being now fused together to create a different product is really where we're seeing the disruption. IoT is something we keep thinking about and talking about, but that's something, again, when you fuse it with different technologies together, you start to make some products which are absolutely unique. So I definitely would encourage learning about emerging technologies. Obviously, I would want it to be on sources that are authenticated. But in the absence of those, at least use the channels that exist today to explore and learn about these. And from a government perspective, really, we should be on a mission to make our whole generation that exists today and the future generations aware of what these technologies mean and could mean for us as a nation and for them in their lives, versus just waiting to see what happens. It's a big challenge to overcome, but we should have at least a mission towards that.
Mohammad, thank you so much for taking the time. It's lovely talking to you.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you again.
थैंक यू फॉर वॉचिंग द फुल वीडियो। आप में से बहुत से ऐसे लोग हैं जिन्होंने शायद हमारा यूट्यूब चैनल सब्सक्राइब नहीं किया। सो इफ यू वांट टू सपोर्ट इंडिपेंडेंट जर्नलिज्म एंड वॉच मोर मीनिंगफुल कंटेंट, प्लीज सब्सक्राइब टू आवर यूट्यूब चैनल।